How many of you have heard of Qualtrics? Okay, it's good. It's been a long ride. I think that what Scott, I really like what's going on up here on the entrepreneurial side at BYU. This wasn't going on when I was here, and that was 7 or 8 years ago. So it's a real treat for me to be up here because 7 or 8 years ago, I was literally in this room working on my laptop, working on Qualtrics stuff, trying to decide whether or not this is what I wanted to do, or whether it was okay to do it, I think. People thought I was crazy, and I agree with them. You kind of have to be a little nuts to take some of the risks that provide the rewards. So I think we've come a long way. Scott mentioned that the lean startup principles. It's definitely not the popular way to go, and I'm going to get into that. But how many have watched The Social Network? How many have seen that movie? That whole movie, if you think about it, it's about equity. That's it. Who controls the equity? And at the end of the day, equity is what drives everything once you get down the road. So you've got to figure out how to grow a company while retaining as much as you possibly can, so if it does take off, you can reap the rewards. And we can go on and talk about stories all the time where people have put all the effort in to take off, and by the end, they're left with nothing. And so what's the point? It would have been a lot easier to try something else. So do I have a mouse or a clicker guy? All right. So the title of my presentation is Riding the Biggest Wave. I'm going to be extremely repetitive today, okay? So don't think I just have a bunch of typos in my presentation and slide after slide. I think it takes about 3 or 4 times for people to understand things, and I know it does for me. But hopefully there's a couple key points that you can come out of here with. And one of them, I think that's most important, is just to remember, I literally was sitting in this room 7 years ago, 8 years ago. So it's a different, I remember sitting and hearing a lot of people that were presenting going, okay, I don't quite relate there. You should be able to relate at least to that part of the presentation. So let's talk about Qualtrics. Scott mentioned we were in a basement for a long time. We stayed in the basement for about 4 to 5 years trying to figure out what we wanted to do. Had someone given us $30 million in the basement, it probably wouldn't have been that valuable. We wouldn't have learned the lessons that we had to learn to build something to last and to build something that's actually meaningful and has value. The other side is if we could nail it in a year, someone else is going to be able to nail it in 6 months. So you want to develop something that's hard to follow. And choosing the vehicle that you develop or the vehicle that you decide to ride is extremely important, because it's the same amount of work to ride something that is going to have a cap on it or a smaller payoff than it is for something that might have a much larger return. Because at the end of the day, you're going to work hard either way. So we stayed in the basement, and we stayed extremely focused on what it was that we wanted to accomplish. We had one brand. By the time we were in 2006, we moved out of the basement. I've got story after story on what it took to actually move out of the basement. The only rule was we couldn't take outside funding. So I used to go to my dad and I'd be like, hey, man, I'm really frustrated about this. I'm really frustrated that we're getting killed in the market or that this product's better. And he'd look at me and say, well, what are you going to do about it? And at the end of the day, it all came back to me. Well, I'm frustrated too. We're not going to go get outside funding. Go fix it. And that's a really good lesson to learn, because at the end of the day, it's really easy to sit back and say, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. But when someone says, okay, what are you going to do to fix those 3 things? You really think about what you say because you might own it afterwards. So that's kind of what's happened. So we decided that we were going to focus on business schools. And recently I've heard in Silicon Valley and all over, oh, that was such a brilliant strategy to go out, to go to market. It's really paid off. It was actually the only strategy. I had no money. I had no mailing lists. I could look up professors online. They do surveys. I could sell it to them. It was a hard sell, though. You had people that had no money. They were extremely demanding, and the requests were out of this world for what they wanted to do. But we got through that, and our focus was 250 universities. We wanted to sign up 250 universities. And the whole time our thought process was, if we sign up 250 universities, everything else will take care of itself. So I remember calling my brother all the time, who was at Google at the time, and I would say, hey, we're going to go do this. And he just, hey, where are you at on your 250? Put me back in my place. Next week I call up, the market's going this way, our competitors are doing this. Where are you at on your 250? And so we had such a strong goal to get 250 universities that by the time we got them, everything was lined up. And we're starting to see the payoff on that, because we'll have students that will use it here. How many of you are going to be in a business somewhere and will know of Qualtrics? It's the Mac model that Steve Jobs implemented in the 80s, or earlier than that. So we have hundreds of thousands of academics out there now that are now in the workforce that have used our products, but it probably wouldn't have been the model of a venture firm when we were in the basement, because they wouldn't want to sit around and wait for 10 years for that to pay off. Does that make sense? But it was kind of the model that worked for us. So we decided to lease a small office. I don't know if I can see it here, but it's right across from the lacrosse field. We had 3,500 square feet. We didn't know how we were going to fill that up. We had to fund all the growth ourselves. We leased the office space. We then leased the space next door. And within a year, we had purchased the entire building. And now everyone always says about growth that it just blows up. Every one of those decisions that we made were conscious decisions along the way, and I call them checkpoints. So you actually have to make a decision going, okay, are we going to do this? Are you ready to interview 100 people? It just doesn't happen. People just don't show up. They're the right people. They get in share, and they start making money. All right? You actually have to work really hard to grow. It's probably the hardest thing. And the funny part is no one can teach you how to do it. So a lot of it you have to go through yourself. We reached 10,000 users on our product. We bought the building. A year ago from December, we moved down to the river bottoms. We leased 18,000 square feet. Less than a year later, we're now in 50,000 square feet. So we're up around 200 employees, and we'll probably hire another, I'd say 250 in the next year and a half or so. So we're planning to expand quite a bit. This is the real, I would say, sensitive part, because we've had a model for a long time that we're not for sale. Okay? And I put a little, none of you play poker, but it's really a poker match. How much do you leave on the table? Now, we've had people offering us a lot of money for the last couple years, and I mean a lot of money. And it's been this kind of ebb and flow. We've had to try to figure out when's the right time to bring on a partner. Okay? And for 5 years, I just told people, no, we don't, sorry. You know, in telling some of the top venture firms or the top private equity groups in the world that you're not interested is kind of a weird thing. That's probably about all I'm allowed to talk about on this front right now. There's some crazy stuff going on with Qualtrics, but hopefully you'll read about it. Okay? A lot of cool things are happening on this front. Qualtrics has maintained a very low profile on purpose. You won't see billboards. You won't see us up for Entrepreneur of the Year. We've decided this year we're going to blow it up. We've got enough customers. It's time to blow it up. We want our employees' parents reading about Qualtrics in New York City. And there's no reason why we can't. We have an amazing story to tell, so we're actually making a conscious effort to do this. I've turned down Entrepreneur of the Year for Ernst & Young, that application process 3 times. We've never done Inc. 500. We've decided that it's okay to just make money quietly. As long as your customers know who you are and they like you, what's wrong with that? We don't have to deal with everything else. No one sues us. No one, I mean, it's great. So I don't have that big of an ego. I think it's a lot better when people sometimes don't know who you are. So unfortunately, we're out, and we're going to have to respond. So this is Liz Tanner here, by the way. She's going to be a key role in blowing that up this year. So it's good. It's a good time for Qualtrics. As I mentioned, we have a lot of universities. Everyone who raised their hand, if I go to Michigan and ask people who uses Qualtrics, it's the same thing. Or Duke, and we have more users at Purdue University than anywhere else. I think we have 3,000 people on campus that have access to Qualtrics. which is pretty cool. And what's happening is that's now carried over into the corporate world. So we're signing up about 500 customers a quarter right now, which is a lot to digest. I think last quarter we signed up 4 airlines. So the entire cruise industry, pretty much a lot of the sports teams, the NBA, the NFL, and we're constantly trying to figure out what to do with all these customers we're signing up and how to kind of nurture them as much as we can, because that's an important process and part of the process. But everyone's using it for something different, from testing the videos. If you watch Dancing with the Stars online, the purpose of Qualtrics, is the way we see it, is that it's data collection. Anytime you need to collect data, use Qualtrics, because that's all a survey is. It's just a data collection tool. It's a form. And so anytime you need actionable data, Qualtrics is a tool. And it doesn't matter whether it's a startup, on the HR side, on a website. Anytime you need to give feedback, this is what we use it for. Now, everyone else in the industry or in the software world tries to put you in a box, but at the end of the day, it's pretty simple. If you want to collect data, this is the tool. And that's why there's 3,000 people on campus that use it for different things. So I'm going to talk a little bit. I gave you a little overview of Qualtrics. I'm going to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship, because that's why everyone's here, right? And I'm going to talk a little bit about some career advice. But before I jump into that, I've done this once already. I've done a lot of these. Is there anything that any of you want to know specifically? I know we're going to get into a Q&A, but maybe I can address some of this. I know that time's short. So is there anything that someone wants to know that I'll have Liz write down, and I'll try to address it as I'm going through this. Did you? Yeah, what is it? When are we do the IPO? Put that down. Anyone else?
During those 8 years before you actually launched Qualtrics, were you 100% working on Qualtrics, or were you doing other things?
Put that down. Anything else? We'll get into the Q&A afterwards, but.
Who were some of your early partners? I mean, you mentioned your dad in the basement.
Yeah.
Whether is there anyone, who
yeah.
else did you bring in?
That's good. I'll address that one as we go through this.
What type of benchmarks and goals did you have before the 250?
That's great.
It's difficult to deal with the psychological effects of all the risks you take on going into it.
Yeah, that's huge. I'll try to get into that.
How did you, maximize your growth while retaining so much equity? What were some things you did?
It's good. Okay. That's good to know, because I think if I can hit on those, we'll do good. So let's talk about entrepreneurship. I've kind of drawn up my motto on entrepreneurship. There's a lot of people that think they're entrepreneurs. I don't even know what that means, to tell you the truth. I see people that have 13 companies. They're an entrepreneur. They start all these things. I can't even handle one right now. So I'm wondering about the 13 that someone else is running. Okay? I think a lot of people confuse entrepreneurship with ideas and creativity. I think that's great, but there's a whole nother component, which is opportunity. I can't talk about entrepreneurship without talking about opportunity. I actually think being opportunistic is more valuable than being entrepreneurial, because I know a lot of great entrepreneurs who, in their minds, but they don't jump on opportunities, so what's the point? Or a lot of people who jump on the wrong opportunities. So I think that this goes hand in hand, and that equals success. Then the other side of it is, what is success? Okay, is it money? And for me, that's just a way to keep score. So what is it? And maybe one day a lot of you will be in a position where you'll have to determine what that is. What is success? Because that's a tricky conversation. I've had to think about that a lot lately. Okay? Because if it's just the money side of it, there's a million ways to slice it. But what actually makes you successful? And that's kind of my mantra, that there's two components. Let's go through this, okay? This is a picture of my business partner, whoever asked that question, Stuart, employee number 3 at Qualtrics. Can everyone see that? Kind of, yeah. This is us in the basement. Okay. Stuart was in the accounting program. We were actually mission companions. And we decided, and I kind of convinced him, that he would come work for Qualtrics, and while he was at school, he was kind of doing this for free. Well, he turned down, I think, a $60,000 job offer at PwC Consulting to work for $8,000 at Qualtrics after graduation. He made $12,000 the next year. He now owns 10% of the company. Okay? Probably no one I met more driven than Stuart. 6 a.m., I'd call him. He's already up. He'd ran a mile. He'd swam and read the Wall Street Journal and done his devotional. Okay? That's why I wanted him as a business partner. Okay? That's still how the guy operates. But this is a guy who could do anything he wanted to do. And this is what he bought into. And it wasn't sexy. Look at it. Okay? We're in the basement of a house trying to make it happen. So, is that what opportunity looks like? Nere's a picture of Google early on. I had a brother who was working with us in the basement and got a call one day that he needed to come out and check out this company in the Bay Area. He went there. I think there was about 1,000 employees. And I remember on the phone him saying, you know, I'm really not interested. Oh, not even for that salary. It was a fourth of the salary he'd made in New York a couple months earlier before his company had sold. It was a friend who convinced him to go out there. And he was like, no, I don't want to go. I'm not interested. This isn't good time. It's a waste of both of our time. So he goes out there and signs a deal with them that weekend, okay, for a fourth of the salary at a company with 1,000 employees. He retired 7 years later. Okay? So how do you know what opportunity looks like? So it goes back, for me, is does being an entrepreneur mean that you've got to create it? I didn't create it all. I partnered with my dad who had this idea. But I've been extremely entrepreneurial. We had to grow the whole thing. He didn't create it at Google. So I think that there's a lot of wisdom around opportunity as opposed to getting fixated that I'm sitting here waiting for this Google opportunity to come along. Well, maybe someone else has already got it and you need to jump on it. Here's the first time I'm going to talk about this. I don't know that you can predict what it's going to look like. How many of you are married? Okay? I get in trouble when I talk about this. How many of you, when you were younger, picturing your wedding day, saw it exactly how it would be? Or the picture you had in your head of what it was going to be like when you got married, and it turned out that exact same way? It's a little different, right? For me it was. I mean, I loved it. It was great, but it wasn't what I had in my head. And I think that when you're looking at opportunities, it's hard to see the basement here and say, that's it. This is what I've been waiting for. Okay, I'm going to go back. Let me see if I can go back. All right. So when it comes to riding the biggest wave, what you can do is look at it and say, is this the biggest wave? Okay. What's the downside of going to Google? Is there a downside there? Are you going to take a step backwards? There's not. There's not a downside of doing that. Because from that wave, you could get on any other wave you want. So let's say you have an opportunity to jump on the Google wave. Where can you go from there? There are 100 waves. So the key is how do you find a swell that's coming that you can identify? Because I don't think it's possible to look and see this basement picture and say, this is it. I was in that basement and I wasn't 100% sure at the time that that was it. Not only that, I had 10 college roommates throughout this time that were closer with me than Stuart was. They all went through the basement. We were all in the business school together. I was playing golf with them a couple months back, and one of them turns to me and says, "Why didn't we all work at Qualtrics?" And I was like, "I used to bring you to the basement. Why didn't you?" Because they couldn't get their head around it. And there's going to be a lot of you that probably can't get your head around the opportunity if you think about it the wrong way. I interviewed a guy a while ago from BYU who I asked where he wanted to be in 3 to 5 years. And he said, "I want to work for a company that's going somewhere, that's got upward trajectory, and this, and this." I looked down his resume, and it's like project manager at myfamily.com and then Ancestry. And I'm like, they just went public. Don't you think that was what you were looking for? He's like, "Well, I guess I never thought about that." He was so set out on what it was that he missed a pretty good opportunity and a wave that he could ride. Okay? Failure to launch. Nothing happens in the harbor or in the dock. Okay? I have a buddy who just sold a company that I was at lunch with. It's a hospice company. And we were at lunch with someone else, and someone goes, "How in the world," and he's our age, he's my age, "how in the world did you get into hospice?" And he said, "I didn't. I got into rehab centers to rehab for outpatient therapy, and we were going down that road, and then we made a natural transition to hospice." They would have never been able to sell the rehab center. But he didn't sit and wait, shining his boat, for this great swell or opportunity to come along. He actually got out in the waters where all the action's happening and jumped from what he set out to do to a huge opportunity and made a ton of money. So what you always set out to do and where you end up are totally different. If you would have told me in the basement that we would be where we are today and developing the products that we are today, that a lot of it wasn't even the direction that we were going. We first set out to do academic research. But if we would have waited for the opportunity here, nothing would have happened. Questions up to that point? I'll probably wait till the end. Okay. I'm going to give you some unsolicited career advice, all right? Is everyone ready? Ready or not, here it comes. Okay. Risk. Everything has a risk meter, and it falls somewhere on the risk meter. Okay? I have been working a little bit with some of the recruiters at BYU, and I heard one of them say to me, "Well, some of our students are just a little more risky than others," in reference to the Qualtrics opportunity. 7 years ago, the company that I was going to work for, I'm not going to mention names, has laid off 120,000 people since then. Okay? Out of all of my friends who were in the business school with me, that I talk about, the 8, how many people, what do you think the minimum amount of jobs that one of them's had out of the whole group? What's the average? Okay, 4. 8 years, 4 jobs. That's the minimum. There's no one that's had less than 4. Did you guys know that? If I looked at this room, I would say 90% of you are going to have 4 jobs in 8 to 10 years. What's risky? Now or then? I don't want to break any, I don't want this to be a downing meeting for some of you, but it's important to understand that because it might change the way you look at things. I'm the only guy that's had 1. So I would think that my path was probably less risky than theirs. But this is always an equation of when is the right time. I have a friend who just came to me and said, "I got this great business idea. I've always wanted to do it, and now I'm going to do it." I'm like, why didn't you do this 8 years ago? Because now look, it was just them, and now it's him and his wife. How hard does that get? It's a little more difficult, right? You got a boss. Or your junior companion, whatever it is, all right? Then you got a house.
Senior companion.
Senior companion. Then you got a house. You're kind of locked in, right? Then you got kiddos. How much risk can you take in this situation? That gets to be very difficult. Your risk meter just got pretty conservative. So you've got to understand there's probably not a better time than now to take a risk. I think that's one of the key points of this is look at the waves, look at every opportunity like a wave, and try to figure out where the biggest wave is. Don't squabble over $20,000 in difference in salary. Because at the end of the day, that is such chump change in the big picture of things. As you saw with Google and with Stewart. 40 grand was the difference between, I think, a second-year salary and $45,000, second-year salary and PwC's offer. And by him hanging in there and going this route, it's been tens and tens of millions of dollars, plus an opportunity that he wouldn't have got there. And he would have been probably looking for a job 3 years later anyways. So, I'm scaring everyone in here. All right. So as far as career advice, understand the noise. There's a lot of noise. I was told that I could not apply to BYU unless I had 60 credits. I applied anyways with 32 and got in. Okay? I was told that there's no way we can do this without raising capital. 1,000,000 times. Well, we did it. We've done it. Okay? Understand where the advice is coming from and try to surround yourself with people that you want to be like, and try to not take that much weight on the advice that's coming from people that maybe you don't or haven't been there. It's been interesting. Going at this alone without private equity has been an interesting opportunity or an interesting path. And what we've tried to do is I've tried to surround myself with people that have either done that or come really close to it. And it's an entirely different conversation than those who haven't. Every single person who hadn't has been, Ryan, sell. Well, if we would have sold last year or sold portions of our company last year, hypothetically it was a difference between $5 million per 1% and $2 million for 1%. So the noise can be really important. And the negative noise can be it can be catastrophic. So surround yourself with the noise that is good, that you trust. That's important. Okay? You need to care, but don't care too much. Remember where you're at on the risk meter. Okay? So there's not a better time to take a little risk. And bet on yourself. If you don't want to bet on yourself, there's plenty of jobs where you can go hide. They won't know who you are until 6 months down the road. But if you're good and you want to be compensated and rewarded for how good you are, bet on yourself. That's what I wanted. That's why I like golf. No one can tell me, I go out there and I shoot, and what I shoot I have to deal with. It's all up to me. So if you want to bet on yourself, there's not a better time. So remember, you might have 4 jobs in the next 10 years. You need to care, but don't let it kill you. Okay? Ride the biggest wave. Look at every opportunity. Is this the biggest wave? And it can be under different factors. It can be financially. Maybe that's the biggest financial wave. But how about from a personal progress standpoint? Or leadership? Or I'm going to get opportunities here I'm not going to get somewhere else. Or is this the next billion-dollar vehicle? Is this the next Google? That's how you should look at it. It doesn't mean that you've got to go find the wave. That's important to know, because you're going to be in the dock for a long time when the guy next to you might have already found it but doesn't know what to do with it. So that doesn't mean you have to sit and wait to start it all. Okay, let's talk about Qualtrics hiring. we're kind of known to have a weird hiring process, but let me explain a little bit about that and what we look for when we hire. Okay, number one is, what is their trajectory? Okay, and I don't know how to talk about this without being a little insensitive. If I see someone who's done with their MBA program that had a really okay job before, you can kind of see that, and then they graduate and no one offers them really a job for 3 months, what does their trajectory look like? Okay? Or we get someone who's coming out of undergrad, who's got 5 job offers, who's a 3.9 student, maybe has a 21 on the ACT, married, working, but has a high GPA in the business school. What does that tell me? Person's a hard worker, action-oriented, maybe not be as smart as some of the other people, but knows how to get it done, and I'm thinking this trajectory is this way. And so what we're looking for is people that have this upward trajectory that can have the wisdom and the energy, or this can be older than they really are. They can step into a role at 26 that most people would require someone with an MBA and 7 years work experience. That's what we look for. I've got someone who's opening up Europe, who opened up Europe for Qualtrics, who's 3 years out of school. We want half our revenue to come out of Europe. Came to me and said, hey, here's our $1 million proposal for opening up Europe this year. I sent him back and said, I need $4 million. Go figure it out. How much money do you need? Here's a blank check. Okay? That's pretty entrepreneurial. It's enough that he's not sleeping at night. Okay? So we're looking for people, and think about yourselves when you're looking at opportunities. What's my trajectory going to be? Is it going to be from Google to this company? Is it going up, or does it kind of taper off? Okay? Think about that. Write your own future there. Second is, can they pivot? Where's Kelly? Kelly, how long have you been at Qualtrics?
All 3 years.
Okay, what'd you start out in?
Scheduling meetings for salesmen.
Okay, Kelly is now in charge of recruiting and hiring. Okay? So, didn't come in that position. When you're a fast growth company, you need someone that can come in at one position and go to another. It's all hands on deck. We prefer to promote from within. So we got to look around and say, who can do this in the organization? All right, go play ball. I mean, that's kind of how it is. So we've got to figure out if people can pivot. I don't want someone that only speaks Korean and that can be there at night. No glue functions. We need people that the same person that's a Korean speaker running a sales team can jump over and open up any other area because they've got the leadership skills, or, that's not going to be too big of a task for them. And in a fast-growing company, what we do is we kind of feed the winners and starve the losers. That's kind of a ruthless way to put it, but we'll give people opportunity until they break. And the way we do some of our sales is that way. We've got a 26-year-old kid who's got 120 people that work for him. I would have never thought that when that person walked into the basement that that's what they would be able to do. But we gave him 4, we gave him 8, we gave him 10, we gave him 30, and he's hit it all in stride. Where we've given other people 4 people and they break. And they've got more experience. So understanding if you can pivot is absolutely important in trajectory. And then the other, it says other people identified them as A players. A lot of the people we hire have 4 and 5 job offers. Okay? Are these the people in your groups that everyone wants to work with? Does everyone in the company feel the same way? We do group interviews. We want everyone to be bought into that person because we're actually taking that person and sitting them next to someone. If someone's really smart, really bright, really ambitious is sitting next to someone who's not, how excited are they going to be to go to work? So the goal is to hire someone super smart, super bright, super ambitious, and someone even better next to them. And that gets to be tough. And so that's what we're looking for. And once again, when you look at every opportunity that's coming your way, try to figure out if this is the biggest wave. Is this the biggest wave I can ride right now? Because trying to figure out if it's the right billion-dollar company or this is the next Facebook is pretty tough to do. Think about the basement picture. But looking at it and saying, how big's this wave? Then you're not going to ever go backwards. And that's what Stu did better than a lot of people I know. He said, this is a huge wave if we can nail it. And it's pretty cool to see that. So, plug for Qualtrics, we're hiring like crazy. Okay? Kelly can take anyone's resume. We need to blow it up. We want to do something that hasn't been done in Utah. And we got some pretty exciting stuff coming down the road. So, Q&A? Questions?
How do you adapt your product to compete with things, like Google has offered forms and stuff? How do you adjust to competitors?
How do we adjust to competitors?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an ongoing process. I mean, Google's had a product out there that does forms. I mean, there's definitely features, ease of use. But at the end of the day, you've got to look at the market. Right now, we feel like our market's wide open. No one owns it. We've got as much traction as anyone does, so it's really a foot race, and continue to develop good products and listen to our customers. At the end of the day, I'm not really concerned about what Ryan Smith wants in the product. What I want to know is, what does E-Trade want in the product? And I want to get it for them. And if I listen to the customers, our product's always going to be the best. And that's why the product's where it's at today. It's not because this is what we wanted to develop, that the randomization of every question or launching it to Twitter was what I really wanted to do, but it's what Wikipedia wanted. It's what the folks at Harvard wanted. And so I think the way to do that is you always listen to the customers, and they'll tell you exactly where to go. It's hard. It's a lot harder done than said, but it's the way to go. Customers will drive you.
So what's been your favorite part of the whole ride thus far? And where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years?
That's a good question. I've never had someone ask me that. I always ask that to other people. I think to be honest with you, the last couple months have kind of been probably the best part for me, because we've maintained a really low profile, and as an entrepreneur, is being in my role, there's 20% of you or 25% that's always going, okay, I think this is the right way. I feel like it's the right way, but I'm not quite sure that this is the right way. And to get some of the validation that we've gotten from some of the people that have watched a lot of companies like Facebook or Apple, and really have people want to back you and seeing you as one of the next hot tech companies out there and mentioning you in those sentences is pretty cool. That's a pretty fun part. And I want to do something great. If it was about money, I'd be done a long time ago. We want to do something great here in Utah. If you think about a lot of the companies, a lot of groups bail out early. I don't know what it is with our culture, but I like the Groupon approach. Okay, whether they're going to crash and burn or not, I don't know. But when you turn down however many, I don't know what Andrew Mason turned down. It was like $1 billion something. But at the end of the day, I want to do something that hasn't been done. It's been cool to watch the employees grow. Employees buy houses and call this their career and plan on being a part of Qualtrics. You know, I don't know. I can't really wrap my head around an IPO right now, but it's not out of the question at all. But, you know, I've already been at this for 8, 9, 10 years. I've got another 5, 10 years in me. I'm young. I'm 33.
You said you want to do something that's never been done in Utah before. So what is that specifically?
That's a good question. I think, you know, I don't know how many $4 and $5 billion software companies there are, or there has been. I mean, WordPerfect got pretty close, but WordPerfect sold to Novell, you know, 1.4 billion is what it was. I'd like to have $1 billion in revenue I think that would be cool. There's only one privately held company that's gotten there in the world. It's SaaS. I don't know how that's going to look. I don't know. I think there's a lot that we have to offer. It's one of the reasons why we've stayed here in Utah County, where everyone else takes off and is going up into different places. I think there's a lot that we can do here. I mean, there's 70,000 college kids in this town, or 60,000 college kids. If you can't find talent here, there's bigger issues. Okay? If you can't have fun here, there's also bigger issues. Okay? So I think that I don't know what it's going to be, because I don't know what it's going to look like, but I think that we have a chance to. We're sitting on a vehicle in Qualtrics, and this is another great thing. There's a lot of, like, my brother runs a large craft company. It's $70 million in revenue. No matter how hard he pushes that, he's probably going to cap out at about 150 unless he acquires a ton of other companies. We're sitting on a vehicle that can legitimately be a $3 to $4 billion company. And that's what's crazy. And I think that's what we probably didn't know when we started, is the vehicle that we're on, the space, the market where we can go, and that's pretty cool.
When you first got this idea to do, education type research or whatever, what was it about the idea, or what problems you were solving that you said, this is something that I'm going to spend 4 years in the face doing? What
Yeah.
was it that made you stick through that?
Well, I don't think we said, okay, we're going to spend 4 years in the basement figuring this out. We were just trying to get people to do online research. It was a thing of the future back then, and we were trying to change the way academics did research. If you think about it, when you develop a product, you've got to matter. You have to add value. And there was a lot of opportunity for us to add value. Paper pencil surveys, they were doing everything a little backwards or a little outdated. And we had a chance to go in and take a month-long process and narrow it down to 2 days. So that's what we were trying to do, is be innovative, and we're still trying to do that. We're trying to add value. And that's what you got to look at. Do you really add value? I think this person back in the back. Yeah.
So how did you support yourself just paying the bills for those 4 years? Did you get sales early enough to pay yourself?
Well, me and my dad worked out that whatever I sold, we'd split. I remember when I sold my first $7,000 license, I took the week off because I had so much money. So that was kind of that's kind of how we did it, and it wasn't easy. I think that being single, I was single. It's pretty easy. Even when I got married, the bills weren't that much. It'd be a lot harder to do that now with 2 kids and one on the way. So.
At the beginning, you had a set goal of 250 schools.
Yeah.
That were your target. What was your sales model to go and get these schools? Like, who were you talking to? Were you just looking up numbers, or did you use your dad as a resource?
No, we just had to set a target that this is what we were going to do, because it's so easy to get distracted and look down a month later and say, we didn't get anything done. So we had to discipline ourselves, and this is where I think most companies fail, is when they're undisciplined. And we set the goal at 250, and it didn't matter how we got them. We had to go get them. That was it. I remember the 2 last business schools we had to get were NYU and the Tuck School at Dartmouth. Well, I put a bounty there that was more than the license cost to get them, just to knock them down, and we ended up getting them. So we just weren't going to fail. And that's kind of our thought process again. There's so much passion there that we're going to go out and do it, that we just did it. And it required getting on a plane going out there. It required calling people up and selling them. It required references. I want to know all of your friends that could use this. I mean, everything that we had to do to get them closed.
What advice would you give those that are trying to be opportunistic? What would you advise them to say? Advise them to look for in those companies that you said, like maybe your buddy has that idea, or maybe someone else has that idea. What would you look for?
So to be opportunistic, I think you've just got to be open. Okay? I don't think you should be closed-minded about any opportunity, because if I would have been closed-minded about this, I would have been in a different spot. The other thing is there's no right way. Okay, I've done everything the wrong way. Everything. And it's worked out beautifully. So I think that you're smart enough, you know what you can do, and just bet on yourself. It's it. You want no one else controlling your future besides you.
And you said it best, trial and pivot, trial and pivot,
Yep.
trial and pivot.
Okay.
I know the class is over. We're going to continue the Q&A. Let's give Ryan a big hand.